Hi, everyone. Mark Koziel, if, in case you didn't already know that. I want to welcome the Global Executive Board to our Trends in the Global Profession. I am delighted to be here with Tom Hood today, CEO of the Business Learning Institute, where we plan to have this strategic planning session in great detail on August 12th, but wanted to set up as much as we could ahead of time to really make that August 12th incredibly effective. I'll be joined by Rebecca Brown, who will be helping and facilitating. She'll be the main lead on getting us through a strategic planning session on August 12th. But to get to that point, we really need to set the context. What's happening in the profession globally now that we should be focused on? We're recording this on July 31st. By the time you see this, and then by the time we get to August 12th, a lot of things could change again in the global profession and things with the pandemic. So with that, let's get right into it. And let me introduce you to Tom. Tom, take it away.
All right, Mark. So yeah, we actually collaborated on this. So we're going to give you the best of both of our insights around what we're seeing going on. Obviously, we go back a long ways with Mark and the AICPA, and you guys have a great find there. So I'm honored to be working with Mark in this new capacity. So we're gonna ask you all to like actively listen. This is kind of a flipped presentation, right? We're going to present it to you, and you're going to be thinking about it, and then facilitating your insights when Mark and Rebecca get you together. Three major things I want you to be thinking about, like what do these trends, the things that Mark and I are presenting, what do they mean to your firm, to the global accounting profession, and to Allinial Global? So kind of three levels of thinking, but I want you to like literally just jot some ideas down, the things that really stick out for you, catch those. And then obviously when you facilitate with everyone, we'll get the wisdom of the crowd. So I just want you to be ready to take those notes, and then we'll close with those instructions again. So let's get rolling. I love to start with, actually this is a book that Bob Bunting, when he was the chair of the AICPA and CEO of Moss Adams, he gave me this book back in 2008. It's a lot older than that, but it's a classic. And Drucker, who I love, says, the greatest danger in turbulent times is not the turbulence, but to act with yesterday's logic. And a time of turbulence is also one of great opportunity for those who can understand, accept, and exploit the new realities. It's above all a time of opportunity for leadership. And in the midst of all this COVID thing, I think we want you to be thinking about, we like to say, get your opportunity antennas out. And as we go through this, start thinking about where's an opportunity for our firm or our association to make some big leaps here. And I'm going to start with this telescope. This comes from a friend of ours, Emmanuel Gobillot, a global leadership guy. And he talks about, if you think about a telescope, when it's all the way in, right, you see what's right in front of you. That's the gold circle in your business, in the association, or in your practice, if you will. Click it out one more, you get to on the business. All the way out, we go to out, you get to see the horizon and a wide angle. And we're going to give you that wide angle and then kind of zone you in. But here's a magic ratio. Gobillot would say, ideally, if you're an executive, magic partner, CEO, et cetera, you probably should be spending no more than 30% of your time in the business, doing actual work or serving clients, et cetera. 50% of your time should be on the business. That's thinking about systemizing, adding new innovations, right? Working on getting the business to function and go to another level. Then about 20%, what's left should be looking outside, wide angle, scanning the horizon, looking for disruptive trends and opportunities. And that's what we're going to try to share with you today. Now, before we hit COVID, everyone was talking about the fact that we had entered this period of accelerating time called the fourth industrial revolution. I always thought there was only one industrial revolution, but recently the World Economic Forum classified it as four. And the significant piece was our profession really grew up in Industry 2.0 on the heels of the beginning of what we know as the Industrial Revolution, driven by electric and mass production. And interestingly enough, every one of these revolutions was driven by a major technology. So you have steam in the old agriculture days, Industry 2.0. Then it was electricity, assembly lines, manufacturing, railroads, all that stuff. Then you started to get some degree of automation, from the 70s into the 80s. And then Industry 4.0 is this massive, accelerating, exponential pace we're in. And they say the starting point for that was 2007 when Steve Jobs held up his first iPhone that we saw, more powerful than the computers that powered the first Apollo ship to the moon. And that's where we got AI, machine learning, all these massive technologies that are now combining and doubling every year or faster. So that's before COVID. And then March 13, or in Maryland's case, it was March 21st, we saw states beginning to shut down as this coronavirus hit. And I'll never forget, because we wrote our governor and said, CPAs and accounting firms are part of essential services. Interesting enough, the idea of essential business comes from the Department of Homeland Security. And what I think is significant about that is probably for once in a long time, our profession, all of you, were recognized, and this is true globally, as essential parts of the economies, right? So the work that we do, that you do, making businesses file taxes, right, get financing, whether it's Wall Street or Main Street, that's the idea that got us the essential status. And I think we've all done an amazing job. Kudos to all of you for all the work that you have done to help. We think it's even more critical, though, where we're going from here, because this is drawn out a long time. Despite all the relief packages, I think your roles in helping businesses figure this stuff out is going to be even more essential as we move forward. So that brings us to this idea we like to say, are you future ready? This was a survey done by CPA.com back in 2015, and they found that 92% of CPAs were not future ready, meaning they weren't able to identify emerging trends, think about what they might mean, and be able to put them into some form of practice. And that, I love the way they define it, right? It's the capacity to be anticipatory of emerging technology, trends in business, demographics, and the social environment affecting your organization and your clients. So the short way is, are you aware of the trends? Can you predict what the trends will do to your business or your clients if they continue, and either you do something or not? And then the third one is, can you adapt to them? And so we're going to give you a framework that we've been working on for now about 5 years with a global futurist named Daniel Burrus. And so here are 3 trends that you can predictably look at where they're going and use those in your firm. And they are technology, which is happening exponentially, doubling every year, regulations and standards. So all the government relief packages, tax laws and auditing standards and accounting standards across the world, those are all things that are called hard trends, because guess what? Every year they increase, and very rarely do we start to decrease them. And then the last one is demographics. We know how many people there are in the world in any given area, and that those age groups and the demographics of how those age groups interact are predictable to a degree, and you can use them to your advantage, whether you're looking at future markets or understanding your workforce. And there's another thing that I think you're going to hear a lot from both Mark and I, and that is, I think we need to pick our pace up a bit and move from just incremental things to transformational things. And let me give you the definition I like, which is change, or incremental change, is doing things differently. Transformation is actually doing different things. So here's a great example. Excel spreadsheet, was that transformational? Well, it did speed up things a lot, but it was really the 13-column paper converted into a computer. It did adding and subtracting and multiplying, but it still made you pretty much think the same way and do basically the same things, albeit a little bit faster. Versus, let's think about artificial intelligence and auditing. That's doing different things, right? So I think that's what we have to watch now. What can we now do that we never could do before?
And those are the areas where you want to start looking at transformation, or taking a client accounting practice and moving it up into CFO advisory, which is what everyone's trying to get to. That would be another transformational step, completely new piece, new service, doing different things from that standpoint. All right, now we're going to give you the 3 buckets, starting with technology, of what we're seeing in the profession. Mark's going to go dive deeper with some really good examples of specifics around not just technology, but a lot of other things that are going on in the profession from these key areas. So, top technology trends. We've surveyed this now for probably about 5 years since we started working with Burris. He does a global business trends survey every year, and we then survey accounting and finance professionals, both your clients, corporate folks, and firms. And this is the rank order as of the end of last year. And I think it's pretty accurate. And we've seen some moves over the last few years, but big data and high-speed data analytics, and you're seeing lots of new software that are available to both firms and corporates. AI, machine learning, and cognitive computing in both audit and tax. That's always been in the top 2. Advanced cloud, you can see it moved up from number 7, but every one of these transformational technologies available to your firms and to your clients are really on the cloud, and certainly COVID has made that very, very clear. RPA, or virtualization, is another one, robotic process automation, and we're seeing all kinds of it. It's actually built into the Microsoft Excel as a freebie right now. That shows you how prevalent that thing is getting.
Mobile apps, adaptive and predictive cyber. I mean, I think it's the top 6, but I would say to you all, as you look at this, which 2 or 3, what are the top trends? And we're going to be asking you that when you get into your breakout sessions. You're going to see it again when Mark goes through it, and he'll show you some of those really good examples. So top technology trends, hard trend, meaning every year these things are doubling. Next one is government regulations, taxes, standards. So one big one as we look ahead into 2021, in the US, you're going to see state budget shortfalls driving the need for more taxes. The federal, as much money as they're spending in the US, lots more. And I think every country on the earth, for the most part, are starting big relief programs, spending money to kind of keep their economies afloat. And they're going to all have to pay for this. So we think you're going to predictably see these types of things coming up. And for you all, that's opportunity, right? Because people are going to need your expertise to navigate all the new laws. You're also seeing accounting standards changing in response to some of this COVID. So all of that continues to escalate and increase year over year. Let's talk about demographics. Now this is on the left is about the changing demographics of the US, although I think there's different parts of this that are happening in every corner of the earth. So in the US, we're starting to see the shift, they call it the Beijing of the United States, but we're seeing much more minority and ethnic populations growing. And I think that's where you're starting to see some of the social unrest, at least in the United States, and that's been waving across the world as well. The fact is we're a changing demographic all over, and we're blending across the globe, which means there's going to be different social norms and new things that you're going to have to deal with. On the right is projected population. While this is true in the US, all the industrial nations have almost the exact same age profile. Some of the more emerging nations have a different profile. And so in any part of the world, you can get what those populations look like. So for now, if you look at where we are in 2020, millennials are the biggest generation in the workforce. Boomers are on the decline as they begin to retire. Silent generation, the oldest, they're beginning to age out and in some cases expire, unfortunately. Gen X is that middle generation, if you will. They will actually cross boomers in 2028. And what's not on that graph is Gen Z, which you put down low in the 2019, and that will be rising in the next few years. So you're going to be looking at not 4, but 5 generations in your workforce. And that's a more complexity and more things that you have to watch. By the way, diversity and inclusion, which I think has always been something we thought was important, has now got an exclamation mark. A lot has to do with that changing profile along with the social situations that we're seeing. Okay. Then we look at like, so what are other things you can be certain about in this world that's changing really fast? And we would say this exponential pace of technology, these are all hard trends that top 500 firms have agreed on in this kind of priority order that they think will continue to have a big effect on where we go. So you guys can look at that and say, which of these do we think are most important? Notice the talent piece, which there's an automation shift there, but there's going to be a need for different skills as we see the impact of automation. The good news is number 9, trust, relationships, and uniquely human skills are actually going to be increasing in demand. And this gets to empathy and certainly relationship skills, which equals business development. I want to conclude this with a couple slides that say what's happened since COVID. And I love this upper left graph. Everybody's been saying digital transformation, it's not going to happen for years. And then the COVID wrecking ball comes in. 2 points there. This is Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. He says, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. And then on the right, look at that e-commerce growth. So 10 years of growth in 3 months. And that's an opportunity for all of you, right? With your clients, client accounting services, you name it. Next is kind of how we're thinking these phases are going to happen in the near term. Hopefully we get across the reopening phase. Right now we're going to go over and back. Many of you around the world are seeing the same thing. So right now the focus will be government relief programs, probably for the next maybe 2 months. As you start to come through that though, I think we're going to get to a point where you're going to start to say, what things have been working, what things might be kind of semi-permanent, and what are we seeing for our clients, right? Look at how everyone's had to shift their business models, restaurants, entertainment, sports, you name it, just normal offices, right? Working from home to working from anywhere. So then there's going to be a reimagine phase. And this is where we think digital transformation, new business models, distributed work or work from anywhere will be critical. And as we navigate that, we're going to have to start to get to that redefine and reinvent phase, which is now what's the new world look like? What's happened to this economy globally? And what does it mean to us and our clients? 3 skills, anticipation, agility, and adaptation, we think will be important from that standpoint. And if we take those skills and break them down a little further, this is research. Far left, CPA Horizons 2025 AICPA project back a few years ago, but we took all the new research and mapped it against that, which was kind of crowdsourced skills from the profession. And sure enough, the profession kind of got it right. Every one of the new skills has a correlation to things that were in that Horizons project. We think 7 skills. It's a T-shaped professional, boundary crossing skills on the top, leadership, anticipation, strategic and critical thinking, communication, and integration and collaboration built on deep, the kind of vertical part of the T, deep technical accounting, tax, auditing, consulting, along with data analytics, understanding the data in your industry. So that's where we think it's absolutely critical. And so as we get to what's this all mean, the bottom line is we think you do need to increase your future readiness. And by understanding this visible future, right, the hard trends show you a little bit further that you can rely on, right? Technology, government regulations and standards, and demographics. And then if you guys take that and say, now let's anticipate these and figure out what's the right strategy built around your purpose, then you can adapt quickly and thrive. 2 more pieces as we get ready to transition over to Mark. This is the digital maturity model. He's going to refer to it a little bit deeper with examples, but this comes from MIT Sloan's research, and it's really from doing digital, which is bolting on technology, to being digital, which is a whole mindset change about how you do that. And so we think everyone's at the Brown level. Let's increase efficiency, add some new software, et cetera. Number 4 is improving business decision-making, which is now how can we use data-driven insights to guide what we're doing in our firm and help our clients from that standpoint. Then you get to this idea of customer and employee experience,
which is going to be critical from a recruit and retain both customers and people. And then we get up to the top of that, which is the need for systematic innovation and ultimately to transform your business. And when we think about this idea of innovation, we've started to think about it this way. Our profession is really good at what I call hero-led innovation. Some partner, some manager comes in with a great idea from a conference, and all of a sudden he or she's assigned, go build the CATS practice, go do this. We think that's been successful, but in a world that's moving faster, we think you need systematic innovation. So I'm going to give you this framework. You're going to go deeper into it when you get to your breakouts, but fundamentally, you have to have a future-ready mindset for everyone. The leadership culture has to be open and transparent and allow for failure, which is another key point. And then the top three are actually how you innovate. So there's the ERS, everyday innovation, faster, better, cheaper. Differentiating products, services, new lines of business, how you transform existing lines. And then is there a moonshot there? Is there one big thing? Like I've seen firms that pulled into cyber, as a matter of fact, cybersecurity services, and boom, it's like this rapid growth. That's transformational. So I think those are the pieces we want you to be thinking about as you move into, and again, Mark's going to give some really good examples. And my closing piece is this, comes from a trip I had in Bora Bora, kind of one of those bucket list things. We were snorkeling our last day there, and the marine biologist is right there, Dennis Schneider. He's taking us looking at the coral reef there, and he said, the coral reef is dying because of climate change and suntan oil in the oceans. And he said, we realized early on that we were not going to beat those trends. Those trends were hard trends, and we couldn't reverse them quickly. So he said, we took a different approach. We started to innovate by creating an artificial coral. It's got a little electric current that runs to it, and it like quadruples the growth rate. Coral attaches to it and then grows exponentially. So sure enough, he's down there doing an experiment with the Four Seasons. But by the way, he's a Terp. He graduated from University of Maryland. He ended up saying, this is how we're going to beat it. So I really think when we think about those skills, anticipation, agility, you can learn those. Adaptation, I think if you all can get your cultures to think about adapting faster, we can beat these big, hard trends. So thank you for listening. I want to get ready to bring Mark in here in a second. And I want to finish with this, right, Mark? The whole point is these guys are going to be saying, what does this mean to your firm, the global accounting profession, and Allinial Global?
Absolutely, Tom, and that's where we're going to take it when we get together on August 12th. Becca will have some great survey questions that we're going to share as part of this kind of pre-work that we do to get to that point. So if we switch screen shares,
Yeah.
we give this a shot. All right, thank you so much. And there we go. So just to play off of a lot of what Tom already did and such great setup about this, you know, and he talked about transformational change. And I have this slide slightly wrong because I talk about change management, the process, but it also encompasses that transformational. We're talking a lot about transformational now. We're hearing a lot about this in the profession. And I think everyone wants to drive either to give me the right tools or training on the far right, or give me the right technology. Technology will make me transform. And that's not the case without that middle piece, which is what we're talking about now. It is about the business strategy. Our hopes is to take this information, to take what we do here at Allinial Global, and be able to then share it with the regional boards and then share it with the firms as they see fit, to incorporate that into their business strategy, because this is really a partnership between all to make that happen. And it becomes so critical that the business strategy becomes a big piece of that. So when we look at this changing profession and we talk about what's changing in the marketplace demands, Tom touched on this. I think it was number 5 in the certainty aspects, Tom, when you talked about clients' demands being more about insight than it really was about the audit or the work pieces that we do. So complex compliance, advisory services, SOC services, technology, higher level analysis rather than just producing a report, a financial statement, a tax return, forget the data entry or the simple compliance. We need to move upscale. Technology will get us there, but without the right strategy and moving up the pyramid that Tom talked about in that transformation becomes absolutely critical in this. So I like to break this down into three pieces, be it the process, the product, and the people. And obviously the process deals with a couple of different things. Maybe that is part of the business model, but that's definitely where the technology falls into. And if we get the process right, then the product will follow and our people will be happier. They're all intertwined. So you can't take one without the other two. And we'll just kind of give a brief overview of what we're seeing in each of these areas as we go forward. And I'm locked up for some reason. I'm just gonna go ahead and go past it. Is that all right? So when we talk about the process and we think about the technology and the transformation of firm services, there's the ecosystem, there's the digitization of what we do, and then there's the value to the client. And as we look at each of those three things individually, one of the things that I think we could get, and this is a learning from Tom, it's a learning from CPA.com, is understanding what the overall ecosystem is that's available to us. Yes, many of these technologies may be US-centric, but we are planning at Allinial to take a look at what technologies are available globally, what technologies or what markets do we need to focus on a little bit deeper in some of the more traditional technologies that we should have available to us as a profession, and make sure that we're making that available to all ends of the globe as we go forward. And that ecosystem becomes critical. And a lot of these companies, by the way, are really asking to get better engaged with the profession, get better engaged with the market. And this isn't just about affinity relationships. We're talking about true partnerships. So they are working with Allinial and Allinial firms to provide the best technologies available as we go forward. And as we look at all of the pieces of technology that are affecting what we do, it is all about this move to cloud and mobile. And Tom had mentioned, that Microsoft mentioned, 2 years worth of innovation happened in 2 months. I mean, thank God for the cloud. You go back 10 plus years, and Tom's been in the same meetings I've been in when firms have been fighting on moving to the cloud, telling us reasons why they can't move to the cloud. And then virtually overnight with this pandemic, firms were forced into that. Clients were forced into that. If you have a CAS practice that is primarily cloud-based, you've been bugging clients to move to the cloud for years. Pandemic hits, clients have to work differently, and all of a sudden your phone is ringing off the hook based on people wanting to move to the cloud. But cloud is only one piece. And a lot of these, there's been firms that have been kind of playing with some of the technologies that are here. And these are all going to have an effect on what we do well into the future. Tom had mentioned this already. In the top tech trends, you see a lot of the same terms that are here. Some moved up, some moved down. Cloud computing moved up. A lot of firms didn't think it was so important to them. Everyone thought that blockchain was. When you looked at the old hype cycle, blockchain was at the top of the hype. Well, now it's coming into the trough of disillusionment because people are saying, well, maybe blockchain won't be the end-all be-all. Remember just a few years ago when some organizations or experts were saying blockchain was going to eliminate the auditor. Well, now they're saying, well, maybe it's not going to eliminate the auditor or the audit, but it's definitely going to enhance what the auditor does. And I think that becomes a critical component inside of what it is that we do well into the future. So as we look forward into the next piece of where we are, we're going to move into the product piece. And then I'm going to skip right ahead to that slide where we talk about the three-legged stool, the big three of the profession. Now, the profession is doing much more than just this today. But if I were to look at firms and where they can have the greatest opportunity for exponential growth and transformation, Tom, as you talk about it, right? So, some of the new advisory services, they already come pre-bundled in transformation, right? They don't need transformational help other than implementation within the firm, but the actual providing the product itself is already transformational to the client. But when we look at some of our historical services around bookkeeping, tax compliance, traditional audit, this goes directly, Tom, to your digital maturity slide. And this is where I say that when I look at a lot of firms and what their focus was on trying to move that technology drive into today, temporarily, it was definitely in that brown part of the triangle. It was increasing efficiency. If I can increase my efficiency, I can increase my profitability. Yet we could transform our business, we could transform our client's business if we actually deepen the relationship and had deeper conversations with the client. You talked about business model, Tom. You talked about that coming out into the reimagine phase as we break out of these, government programs and the next conversation to have with clients. CAS is built for that. It is built to sit down with a client and strategically talk about how they need to make business model changes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then you look at tax compliance, going into more integrated services around financial planning and wealth. And you had also mentioned the corporate tax and the implications of what's happening to businesses to that. And then the traditional audit, again, number 5 on your list of certainties is the client demanding insights and seeing that AI can drive audits that will provide insights to our clients in a different way. And that's really where I want to start, is in the audit and insurance piece where, some of you are involved, some of you have heard me talk about, others have been very familiar with the fact that the AICPA has talked about a dynamic audit solution. Inside that dynamic audit solution, we talk a lot about 4 key drivers in this process. Now, the dynamic audit solution being created by the AICPA with the help of 36 firms, 2 of which are lineal member firms. You have Wipfli and Eisner-Amper. That is focused on transforming the methodology. And again, it is not change for the opportunity to change slightly. This is pure transformation. It's not doing it differently. It is doing different things. And inside that methodology, you're going to be focused on, looking at risk assessment a different way, how to get AI incorporated into it. What do the data analytics tell us? What does the data lake tell us about that particular industry? And that's where that methodology is going, well on track to where it's at. The technology piece being Caseware as a technology partner, those 2 things coming together. But for a lot of countries, until the standards change, and there's some specific nuances to the IAASB standards on the auditing standards. We had much more rules-based standards that need to continue to transform here in the US, but globally, the IAASB at least was more principles-based, and those implementations will be easier at the global level. But in order to run all of these things, we also need the new skills. And we'll talk about the new skills piece when we get to the people aspect, because that's going to be a very important driver to make sure that the people who we have on the bus can actually steer the wheel, because the wheel is going to look a lot different than it used to for a lot of our auditors that are currently in the business today. So then when we think about then the emerging assurance areas, for those who say, I am an auditor by trade, let's take Germany, let's take France. We have a lot of countries that like to focus specifically on audit services around what they do. It is the expansion of assurance services around that. Integrated reporting, where I can tell you that there are countries doing far more than we are in the US, but keeping an eye on that and helping different countries transform into different integrated reporting services as they go forward. Blockchain, while it's definitely not dead and it's become a lower priority, there's still going to be opportunities to provide some level of assurance around blockchain-based transactions and initiatives that are out there, especially when you talk about blockchain that ends up in the supply chain, and how do we provide assurances in a supply chain environment to do that. Cyber risk management, we have a reporting framework from the AICPA available on that. How do we get cyber risk management globally talked about inside of what we do? And these are only a few of the additional advisory services and assurance services that are going to come out on the back end of all of these things that we're talking about, transforming the audit around what it is that we do. Now, when we get to client accounting services, and we focus on what client accounting services is, CAS is our acronym for that. We love our acronyms here in the US. But when we think about client accounting services, we've been doing this a long time. In fact, that's probably the start of the profession. I said, you know, when you think about where CAS got its start, it is the start of accountancy, right? We were the Ebenezer Scrooge, the Bob Cratchits of the world way back when in what we're doing. Well, this transformational change, giving cloud, giving analytics that we can have and standardization, it has changed the way that it's done. But we've also seen a lot of firms try and just take what they were doing before and again, try to do it a little bit differently and say that they've transformed their practice, and they haven't. So the right business strategy up front, even if it's a pre-existing business, how do we change that strategy? How do we standardize it? What are the right metrics we should be focused on as an organization, as a profession around CAS? Because it's not going to be your traditional metrics of, you know, realization, utilization, hours, rate, all that stuff. Throw all that out the window. There are different ways that we could grow into an even bigger model around what we do. Now, for a lot of our member firms here in the US, we had a sample business model framework that was created by CIMA, one of our partners at AICPA. In fact, we created a new international association around that. And CIMA, on the management accounting side, created a business model framework. I think that framework is fantastic. You could take what's here and you can implement this for any type of business, any line of service for an individual firm. Define, create, deliver, capture. And in the definition phase, who do we want to be? How do we redefine from what we were, and what does the new CAS service look like? And taking the time to actually sit down and do this. Tom talked about, you know, the on versus the in, and with that on portion of what it is that we need to do, really taking that time and looking at it very differently. So now when we get to tax, and tax is a global thing, right? So we look at it in two phases. You have the personal tax needs, you have the business tax needs, and how do we focus on talking to our clients differently in each of these different phases? And on the business tax needs, from an Allinial Global standpoint, consistency between all the practices. How do we deal internationally, making sure that our client needs are being met? Transfer pricing being very popular around that, tax controversy, government assistance programs. So in the US, we had PPP, but a lot of governments were providing a lot of small business relief coming out of this pandemic. And how do we use that as an advantage, a strategic advantage to go forward? Because they're not done. The longer this pandemic sticks around, the more assistance programs we're going to have, and how do we incorporate that into our client business? And then sales/VAT tax, Tom talked about this. The need for additional revenue inside of governments is going to drive additional services for what we do with our clients on a regular basis. So then, and finally, people. And when we talk about the people aspect of who it is and what we do, you know, in 2018, the World Economic Forum talked about the future of jobs, and they said, what are the top 10 declining roles? And you see the items in white that match up to our profession. You know, we weren't on the list once, but we're actually on the list twice: accounting, bookkeeping, payroll clerks, and accountants and auditors. But we also believe that this is static based on if we didn't make any change to our practices, if we didn't make any changes to the profession, if we didn't make any changes to Allinial Global, this is probably true. But we have the power in ourselves to strategically think about how we can change this up. And at AICPA, I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of different things that we did to help try and move that. And we are seeing that globally as well, working with each of our firms in the global markets and working with their member bodies around the same things. Tom talked about growth skills. He talked about new skills and what they are. This is a great list. Think about this as you're going through answering the survey questions that we're going to have as part of this pre-work, is what your needs are going to be. How are you going to transform your business, and what do we need to do as an organization, Allinial? What does the profession need to provide to make all that happen, to make your jobs easier? Now, when you look at the top 10 emerging roles, and again, highlighted in white, are those that can have impact and will be probably incorporated into a lot of our firms, a lot of our organizations. And these are a lot of the skills then that we're going to need to focus on as we go forward. And I think this is really important to think about how we're going to change that skill set as we look into the future. And then finally, for people, you can't help but have a people discussion without talking about diversity and inclusion. For our U.S. firms, we talked a lot about the CEO Action for Diversity, started by PwC, a great initiative. We will talk about diversity and inclusion. I'd like to see from the Global Executive Board where you need help around diversity and inclusion, because I think globally as an organization, we can help drive that conversation. How do we evolve around mentoring and allowing for our people to be mentored, using mentors? How do we use both Allinial Global and the profession to make that happen? And then I think, again, with the pandemic, how are we going to manage virtual work? Now, for those who are involved in the US, our major firm group met yesterday and today. We have a new CEO group that meets, and in those discussions, they were talking a lot about this. What will virtual work look like? What are we going to do with our offices, our real estate? How are we going to make sure that we have the right impact, the right training around those who are going to work remotely now? And I will warn everybody, because I've heard this, I don't think as much from the larger firms, and I hope you haven't had this thinking around it, but this pandemic and this working remote. And there are a lot of firms who didn't have any remote work set up. They didn't have any systems in place. And then they let all their people work from home remotely, and they're saying our productivity went completely down the drain. Well, I will tell you, there is a difference between working remotely and working remotely in a pandemic, right? So in a pandemic, you have kids, you have dogs and cats, you have spouses, you have significant others. You have some people who are actually home alone and completely confined, and there are mental health implications from that. It is incredibly different than what remote work could look like when we come out of this. The difference will be, let's learn from what happened during the pandemic. Let's put some systems in place as we go forward. And I do think that this remote work is going to be, it is, Tom, you can argue against this, whether it's a hard trend or a soft trend. It's feeling awfully hard to me right now that it's going to be around probably indefinitely. But that also changes the gig worker and the opportunity for gig workers. And what can we do, Allinial Global as an organization, to try and allow for, virtual work from anywhere around the globe and really make that effective for the future. And so other areas of improvement around people, I look forward to your survey responses on that, so we could look at and focus on ways that we can move forward into the future. So that is my update. Tom, I want to thank you for your time. Final thoughts, Tom, because this is your system, and I appreciate all the help you're providing us as we look strategically into the future.
Yeah, our methodology is, we like to say, hindsight. What did we learn from last year? So you're going to get some questions about what you guys experienced with your last strategic plan. Foresight, which is what Mark and I did today, looking at the trends, spending that 20% on the outer ring, giving you that insight. And then the next one is, what are we going to do about it? That's the insight part. So that's the hard work, where you all will say, what do we want Allinial to look like in the next 3 years? Kind of cast a little bit of that vision out there. Then you're going to pull all that back, get agreement on it. And then Mark will be able to take that back and with the Allinial team, figure out what the 5 priorities might be. So you'll get all that boiled down from all of you, and then he'll be able to get staff involved and figure out a proposal for the board about what you're going to do with it.
Right. Well, with that, I want to thank everyone on the Global Executive Board for hanging in there with us today. Do the pre-work, get everything done, get it in, so on August 12th, we can have a highly effective meeting. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you also.